multi-generational family businesses. And typically the older generation that wants to retire, their view is you're an extension of my hands and you will do what I tell you and I will make all the decisions. And I often hear them say things like, I don't ever ask a question I don't already know the answer to, which in my view is a huge waste of everyone's time and energy if you already know the answer, unless you're just quizzing me as an employee. And then you have the next generation of leaders. And I'd be curious to know if you see yourself in this one, where the goal is to divide and conquer. Come and be a leadership team where we all take a piece of the responsibility, divide and conquer, come back together and work together. I see that I'm getting a thumbs up from Adam, but this is very much a generational transition that I see in family businesses and outside acquisitions, where we're making a culture shift. Not everyone might be able to make that shift, but a lot of people have been hungry for it. And if we're overt about what we're asking for, this might be an opportunity for people to level up that you can offer as a leader coming in. And so I want you to think about which side of that coin you fall in. Are you kind of a command and control leader, or are you a shared leadership model? Because that will help you think about how to approach the entire process. Oh, Doug, we lost you. Give me a second.
If I may interject on that, in the legacy style of command and control, what we often find once the AE goes in and takes over the business, there is pin-up opportunity of ideas and creativity and innovation. The team has better ideas on how the company could be much better, but they were never given the light of day by the prior owner.
Yeah.
So we've seen that happen a number of times, and those kind of gold nuggets show up in the first 48 hours. I mean, literally, when somebody feels and sees the opportunity. Gloria, you had a hand up?
Yes, it's that other concern is when the company has a lot of turnover and you don't have too many old employees. Basically, the oldest employee has been there for, I don't know, 2-3 years, and everybody has been there for 8 months, 3 months. How to manage that is a big concern to me as well.
That is a huge red flag. And I hope they have some great processes in place and some really good onboarding to get people up to speed quickly, because that is a churn and burn environment.
Okay, thank you.
What I would add to that, from a, I guess call it an Acquira viewpoint, it is a kind of a red flag, but it could be a hidden opportunity if the service product, the service area is a really strong one. And to Melissa's point, if you can document some pretty good process and procedure, being able to move in as the new owner and stabilize that churn and burn can really, you might get some very early wins for earnings growth sooner rather than later in an environment like that. The tricky part is to determine what's the real root cause of that turnover. Is the owner just a flaming you know what and hard to work for? That too can be a different issue that might have impacted everybody that's hanging on in a very negative way, and they're feeling beat down, but they maybe feel captive, that they need a job, they're going to hang around, they're going to endure it. But even at that, there might be some opportunity for you as a new owner with a better idea on how to run things, could really jump in and get a lot done.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Doug. If they're already making money at that level, Gloria, there is so much money laying around that could be captured, because the cost of that churn, the cost of training and finding and replacing, if you can stave that off, there'll be some great opportunities there. And there are some good tools out there. A good employee engagement survey will help you define what needs aren't being met for employees, what's driving that turnover. You'll want one that's a third party, that's scientifically validated. So our approach that we've taken has been validated in 49 countries and 34 languages to understand what are the basics around my job that needs aren't being met, my manager, my team, my perspective of my opportunities to grow. And that's not necessarily ladder growth. It's learn more skills that I can be a more valuable employee and learn how to earn more money. And then how do I feel about the company and our customers? So that would be an approach I would take to get a data-driven prioritization of what needs aren't being met and how can we stave off either turnover that's already happening, or to Adam's point, turnover we don't want to happen. So if I can come in as the hero and say, hey, sounds like these needs haven't been being met, let's attack these things in the order that you've already prioritized for me. I just want to know where you're at so I can meet you where you are collectively. And you'll get things like, you should at least get a scorecard for every team, because every team will have a different culture. And maybe the companies you're acquiring only have 3 or 4 teams. Fine, they still have different situations going on. But then also you'll be able to look top down and say across the board what needs aren't being met. And that can be a great investment that is not very expensive to start off on that. And they probably won't be 100% candid, but they'll still give you directionally what you need to know. I think, Thomas, maybe you had your hand up.
So have you, at what point have you seen buyers be able to do that? Can you, have you seen folks, hand out a employment survey in the due diligence phase, such that we can get that feedback that early on? And what have you seen happen?
If we can get a seller who's doing it as a part of their effort to continue to be better, which is only good for them, even if they part ways with you, if we can do that early, you've got so much clarity on what can happen pre-sale and post-sale. I don't see it happen a lot, honestly. A lot are very, like Doug mentioned, very close to the vest. But if it's one of the, I typically see teams the size you're acquiring. We get an all hands meeting together. We do the engagement survey. I'll get on with them and say, hey, here's what we're trying to accomplish. I am personally the one protecting your data. The survey will take 5 minutes. We're going to do this at the end of our all hands meeting. So you can ask for, help. They get the text message on their cell phone. They do it in 5 minutes. And when they drop off, it's because they finished the survey. And so we get this quick pulse on, hey, where are you at? What do you need? How can I, Gloria, for you and Casey that talk about having no formal management experience. If you come in with an open heart and a desire to hear, you're going to be off on the right footing. And then all you have to do is start supporting them where those needs are met or unmet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, again, to your question, Thomas, generally, we don't see those opportunities pretty close. I'll go back to my spectrum of cooperative sellers. It would probably, if I had to put a number on it, it'd be the rare 20% into the spectrum that might even entertain that idea if it was posed to them. And I'll be honest, in the time I've been with Acquira doing this, which is a while now, I haven't seen an owner yet that has one already existing. They're just not that sophisticated in the people and culture realm. We have talked to some bigger businesses that are way beyond the scope of our typical Acquira deal, and they've got some form of it. I'm talking about like a staff of 40 or 50 employees. They usually have something going on like that. But when you're 25 or under head count, you probably, unless you're a really enlightened owner, you don't have that going on. You rely on the one-on-one and the word of mouth to get the pulse, and a lot of sellers don't even do that really well, to be honest.
Usually it's their wives who are getting the pulse because it comes to them in some manner. The other thing I was hoping to talk a little bit about was this transition of so many of the owners are working in the business, and often they and their spouse, or they and a child, a couple core team members are often exiting. And so in your due diligence, you're thinking about the succession plan. And the way I like to approach it is, let's take a look at what their talent set is and their roles and responsibilities. I think that's already part of the process from the roles and responsibilities. But if we look at it from a talent set, I was working with one acquiring owner earlier this year, and he knew that his office manager was one of the keys to making everybody feel connected and safe. And what that person that was office manager was the wife of the owner, and she was planning to exit. And so what we had her do, and she was very good at her role. He loved working with her. The employees loved her. She was very efficient. And he said, I just want to clone her. And I said, great, let's do that. So we've defined what her role and contributions and talents were. And we went out and sought somebody with some experience, but also that would show up the same way, that would have the same level of responsiveness, of analytical nature, of detail orientation, so that person who sat in that seat next would feel familiar. And he had, I think, 3 really good candidates come through the pipeline from a resume perspective. When we looked at their talent set, there was one that was a 10 out of 10 match with the exiting owner. And he's like, this is a no-brainer for me. I liked her. I liked all 3 of them. But the one that's going to feel familiar to me is a leg up in terms of that team feeling like, okay, this isn't a drastic departure. So that was kind of a fun opportunity. And we use that in the due diligence process too, because they did take that pre-transition. So he was thinking about, how do I work with these 2 owners efficiently to get them what they need in the process. So it's kind of a right people, right seats, but the stakes are higher because we're losing core players that are obviously have an ownership mindset and bearing. So I think the things that are not happening typically with companies the size that you're acquiring is 2 basic ones. And one's the employee engagement piece, that we're taking qualitative feedback from the people who have the courage to speak up rather than a holistic look at that data. And we typically aren't using all of the people science that's come along in the last 15 to 20 years to help us get the right people in the right seats with really good metrics in place to define our thinking around what the demands of the role are, and then to place people in a way that their aptitudes align as well as their experience. And what I see is when we get those pre-hire assessments right, we're getting a couple things. We're getting a cognitive look at their fit. How quick are they going to get up to speed? A behavioral match. How is that shoe going to fit once they're up to speed? But we're also getting collective wisdom that we create. So say I acquire an electrical contractor. If I know what a good project manager looks like, because I've got someone I want to clone, we can get someone who's very much in that same vein. Or sometimes what happens is that guy was good, but we actually have an opportunity to level up because he was known to make a few mistakes and someone needed to proofread his work, but everything else was technically really competent. And so we can just kind of keep tweaking what that ideal candidate is, because in the market, what we're seeing right now is it's a company's benefit that there are so many candidates, but that also creates, like, you get on Indeed and there are 400 resumes you get. How are you supposed to pare those down to the ones that have the capacity to be wonderful? That's where a good pre-hire assessment you can say, look, spend the next 20 minutes doing these assessments, and then I'm going to take the ones that are, a 7 or higher on a 1 to 10 fit score. So I'm not wasting time on someone who's a 2, even if their resume is lovely, because that will affect our culture and our effectiveness and our profitability.
Yeah. One of the big hurdles that we run into, and we talk about this a lot in the ACE framework for the successful change management and transition into the new business, that is the fact that these businesses tend to have evolved with their people. The owner has gone from some form of startup where maybe they really leaned heavily on friends and family to do work to help them get out of the ground and get it up and running. But then they found themselves in a need just to have bodies on the bus, and let's start grabbing whoever shows up at our door without a lot of that assessment and evaluation matching effort. And those people may work out or they may not, or they're there, but they have an incredibly negative impact on a day-to-day basis. We have a situation going on right now in one of our acquisition companies where the senior technician is one of the best in his field, but he's just terrible to work with. He's hard to work with. He doesn't play nice in anybody's sandbox, and he's disruptive to anything the AE is wanting to do for creating a culture at that company. And the reality is, at some point, every one of you will have to get comfortable with letting that high tech, high value from a delivery standpoint. You got to let them go, get them out of the game, because it will totally stall any effort you've got to create the positive culture you really want. So, to Melissa's point, finding the opportunity to leverage some of the amazing assessment tools and tactics that are out there to include in part of your recruiting and onboarding process, so that you can begin proactively filtering and really making some smart hiring decisions about who you're bringing into the tent.
Yeah. There's, with that in mind, that there's a model I use that I'll show you on the screen that I think might be helpful for you to keep in your back pocket. Let's see, this is the one. So when I come in to start working with a client, tell me when you can see this.
Yep.
Okay. So when I come in to start working with a client, we start with their key players, and I have owners rank them on two different axes. So on productivity, are they high productivity or low productivity? And on just kind of values and attitude. We don't have to have our core values already defined, because a lot of these companies don't. But do I like working with this person? Do they have a good attitude? Are they people I'd want more of or not? And so what happens is, it's easy to identify our A players. They have great productivity and they're just a delight to work with. What I see in this bucket is these people do not get enough attention. If you double down on these players, you will get exponentially more value than if you spend all your time where we typically do with our C players, who are not that great and not that great to work with. This is where we unlock a lot of value, because these people are just waiting and they're hungry, but we often get them to an A status and we kind of get out of the way. Then you've got the group that Doug mentioned, our productive jerks, and they are the hardest to let go of because they get a lot done, but they do create problems. They typically show up in operations and in sales. And these are ones we either have to get them on board. That's where a lot of times defining the core values is helpful, to say, look, this is the way we plan to work. If you don't want to work that way, you may decide that you don't want to be here anymore, or you can decide to get on board, but those may be the only choices. So trying to get those B players up to A's. Then there's this other category of B players I call cute puppies, because we really like them, but they don't get enough done. And so either they're in the wrong seat. I'll give an example of an operations manager I was working with that was always just wanted to be hanging out with other people. You put him in sales and he's thriving because he was just in the wrong seat. And so we want to get them right seat and up to standard, or we ask them to be recruiters for us on the other side of their employment, because they really fit here. We just couldn't get them to perform the standards. And that's where your job as holding people accountable. We can be hard on accountability and soft on people to say, look, this is the demand of the job. This isn't me. This is the job that it requires. And if you can get yourself there, I want you here. And if you can't, you're kind of deciding for us. And then we've got our C players who may not get there ever. Go ahead, Doug.
We had I'll give you a case story we had about a year ago. We had a plumbing company that looked really strong, high performance, really strong EBITDA. I think their SDE was up around 900 at closing. So it was the numbers were just phenomenal for the A that bought it. But we went through the early phases of A's, did a little bit of our preliminary work, and things were walking along fine. But we scheduled the first leadership team workshop, where we take all the leadership team off site and do a series of steps with him for a day and a half. And this one guy, who was a very senior person, he was actually a team leader, part of the leadership team. He showed up at that workshop just incredibly gruff. He was the productive jerk profile. And things that were being talked about values and moving forward with the vision of the business, he was just socially incorrect, or what's the word, politically incorrect. Everything he said, it was homophobic, stereotypic, anti-ethnic, racial. I mean, it was just horrible what he was doing. And thank God it was at a small team meeting, not a big forum. But our ace lead integrator during one of the breaks took the guy and said, "You and I need to step outside." And he played bad cop for the benefit of the AE and told this guy, "You either have to clean up your act and get on board and listen to what we're trying to say, or you need to go talk to the new owner about exiting and let him make another plan so that you can move forward." And the guy said, "I need 30 minutes. I'm going to think about that." And he left. And he did come back, and he got the owner and the lead integrator and said, "I want to make an apology. I'm going to apologize to you two right now privately. I want to make an apology to the group." He said, "I love this business and I like what I think we're going to do. I don't know why I went off on the tangent I did. I'm very apologetic, but I want to start now." And he made the jump from the B box up there to the A box literally that same day. And, we all kind of took it with a grain of salt and said, "Yeah, all right, that's nice for the moment, but is it going to stick?" Well, it has. He was a man of his word. But my point in all that is one of the interesting aspects of working in the trades, some of these guys show up with really thick skin, with a lot of grizzle and a lot of edge. And you're probably going to need to be ready as an owner to stand toe to toe and look them right in the eyeball and feed it right back to them. And be ready to tell them that, this is your agenda and this is what you want to do, and don't be afraid of that. And my experience over the decades in working with these folks is they respect that. And if their heart truly is in it, they will consider changing their approach for the good of the business.
And on the flip side, what I see, Doug, is the leaders who don't address that behavior, they're condoning it. And so you're telling the entire team this is acceptable. And that's a decision you have to make as a leader, because every time you don't address that behavior, it's a blessing.
Yeah.
The blessing of that approach. And,
yeah.
And I see the same thing in the trades. The thing I love about working with the trades is these are people who respect expertise in the way that white collar people really don't anymore. They think anybody can be an expert at anything. Meanwhile, if you work in the trades, you know how many thousands of hours it takes to become a master of your craft. And so they respect that. If you're coming in with financial knowledge, if you're coming in what role you're going to play to support that team. And they often don't have a desire in the way that some other employees do to rise to management and leadership and all these desires for promotion. They just want to learn how to earn more money. And there's usually a path to that, because if we can help them be more productive, if we can better process and procedures in place, there's more money on the table to distribute. And so that's what I tend to see in the trades. And they tend to be more, open and less guarded.
Totally.
So how does this resonate with those of you? I mean, what you see in your existing environments? Do you have good examples? Got a couple thumbs up, so I'll take that off the screen. But that was just a way to frame it. The other thing I've seen that can be incredibly effective from the get-go is just getting a sense if you use any of these assessments. I tend to like predictive index because it's really fast and we can use it for pre-hire assessment. So then we can just integrate one. But if we get a sense right off the bat for who are we working with from a talent perspective, because then I can communicate with them more effectively. I know what their needs are. Like if you've got, especially in the trades, a lot of times you have detail-oriented people who don't like to make decisions on the spot. They like to think before they speak. They like an agenda before a meeting, even if it's not the most, sophisticated agenda. It's like, hey, here's what we're talking about. Okay, great. I didn't want to be called into a meeting that I didn't know what it was about. But if you've got someone who's really extroverted and you know that they're comfortable with you just popping in or calling them up and that they actually treasure that, that helps you, to Adam's point, cement that team as quickly as possible. If you can get them to, you know, right off the bat say, hey, I'm trying to get a feel for who you are and how I can support you. Will you take this 5-minute assessment? It's not a huge commitment of time, and you can get further faster with each of those core team members. And maybe you only do it with the ones that you absolutely can't lose because they've been there the longest, or they, you know, have the most client contact. But you want to attack those as quickly as you can and build a meaningful relationship. And some of these assessments, I think StrengthsFinder is another really good one for that, even though it's not okay for pre-hire, but it is a fast way to get a look at, why is this person uniquely wonderful and quirky and talented? And we can meet them where they are, which is what they're hoping from us, that they won't just be a cog in a wheel.
Thomas, you had a question in the chat. How much should you budget for services such as this during acquisition, diligence, and transition? Well, quick answer is that's why we built the ACE framework program. ACE is a 6-month journey. With the ACE program, you get a lead integrator that serves as kind of a senior project manager, change manager for your transition to oversee. Plus, all of us who do the lead integration work come with the business background, knowing the nuts and bolts. All have been entrepreneurs at some point or another and know the game. But in the ACE package, not only do you have the lead integrator, you've got a finance integrator, separate individuals, separate subject matter person. You got a people and culture integrator to address a lot of these issues that Melissa's talking about. And we have a sales and marketing integrator that'll look at helping with whatever the sales and marketing strategy has been up to that point. And in both the case of finance and sales, we at the end of the 6 months, we try to leave you with a blueprint of going forward, what those disciplines will look like in the long run with your business. And effectively, same thing on the P&C, people and culture part of it. Gratuitous plug for Melissa's work. Melissa and I, one of the things we're talking about is an evolution of part of the people and culture solution inside of ACE being a lot of her tools and her strategies to move that forward. So not official yet on that, but teaser public service announcement, we're thinking that way. So as long as she's still happy working with me, we're going to keep having that discussion.
Well, Doug, I know you were hoping to open it up to Q&A towards the
Yep.
end. Is
Yep.
when you want to do that, or is there anything else you think would be beneficial from the
No,
conversation?
let's see. In honor of the time we do have, let's hit that. If we've got any other thoughts or questions people have come up with.
I would just ask, you had mentioned that StrengthsHire app was not good for pre-hire. Why was that?
Oh, so it's actually called the Gallup Strengths Finder.
Gallup's okay.
Strengths Finder. Strengths 2.0, you can buy the book for like $25. And it's just I think it's about a 40-minute assessment. It is not EEOC compliant for hiring, partially because it doesn't take into account the demands of the role. It just takes into account the aptitudes of the person.
Okay.
So what I tend to see owners do is there's a strength in the strengths language called WOO, winning others over. And they're like, great, I want more of those in my sales group. And then what happens is they all get together and woo each other, and they aren't very metrics driven. So it's saving you from yourself, but it is a fantastic team relationship tool. And with your spouse, quite frankly, it is a fantastic tool. So that's a separate discussion, but you will need that in your transition as well.
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Melissa, let me see. Did we cover all the areas you and I talked about when we did our prep?
I'm gonna look back at my notes. Talked about due diligence. Who will we need to replace? What gaps will that create?
Oh, I know one I want to lean a little heavier on, and this is, again, it's more in the spirit of planting a seed with all of you folks who will be getting into businesses. as an owner, there's always a challenge. I go back to the piece I said about the evolution of the business, that people have kind of come along on the journey with the seller for different reasons. And they're usually, when you go top to bottom in the company, nowhere do you have 100% fit of job role need versus person, talent, and match. And there is a school of thought that says, if I really want to optimize my business, I need to take a minute. I need to erase all names and personalities. I need to take a white sheet of paper and draw the boxes of function that adds value to my business.
That's exactly where I wanted to go next.
What do I need in this business to optimize the value I can create and ultimately the earnings I get from it? What do those roles look like? Who are they? What are they going to be doing? What skill levels do they need? How do they interact with each other, et cetera, et cetera? And you draw a blank slate, so to speak, of function-oriented value contribution to the business.
With no names and no faces attached.
No names, no faces. Everybody with us so far? Then you can go back and you can take your roster and start slotting and going, what's my closest fit based on who I've got? Who needs to go in this box or that box, or what level do they need to be? And if I would venture, this is a prediction and just my humble opinion, if you have 10 or more employees, you're going to have at least 2 people on that roster that honestly aren't fits on any of those boxes you just drew. Or they're not enough of a fit. They might have 2 data points that fit and nothing else fits. So, it's an indicator of how much work you might need to do to optimize. And I'm not telling you to go out on the day you do that exercise and fire those 2 people, but I'm saying they need to bubble up on the short list of next steps for the business. And you need to decide, where can they go? Now, is it a function of training? Have they just never been given a chance to step up and do something? Send them to a trade school, send them to a 6-month course at the technical college and give them something to build from and work with. But again, if you really want to optimize your business, don't do it in reverse. Don't take your stack of people and start pressing them to fit boxes that maybe they don't deserve to be in or need to be in.
And my rule of thumb is no one wants to suck at work. No one wants to show up to a role that they aren't a fit for, not meet the metrics that are required of the role. That doesn't feel good to anyone. And so as owners, we have to have the courage to start moving people around, and hopefully with their input, but here's what I'm looking forward to, and giving them opportunities to shine. And when we get clear on what does a win look like, so many employees out there don't even know what a win looks like in their role, besides being on time and checking the boxes they're asked to check on a day-to-day basis. But how do I know if I'm winning? Because that makes it easier for me to ask to receive more value if I know I'm adding more value. And that's something, a shift that we can make as owners coming in, they've never seen before. They're just like, if I stay out of the way of sometimes the owner's backlash, I'm doing great. That's yesterday's business. It's not where we're headed, because companies are getting more sophisticated at all levels.
Katie, if I could turn to you and put you in a hot seat for a minute. You've had experience running an independent business with a good size staff count, head count. Any thoughts about any of this from your perspective?
I think it's one of the most important tools that we had in evaluating the efficacy of our business, because so much is built on the talent. We actually did a 9-block, so very similar to what you shared, Melissa, where we valued culture and value alignment a little bit more than performance. So having a great performer that had a crappy attitude was worse than having an average performer with a really engaged attitude, really team oriented. So the only other thing that I'll add that we haven't really talked about yet is sort of the call to action for leadership. Once you plot your team and you do that talent assessment, what's the commitment that you and your leadership team are making in terms of how you're going to address it, how you're going to take the cute puppies and the C players and elevate them and have those frank and honest conversations. Otherwise, I think you can get stuck in the status quo again, which is almost worse than having a lot of really uncomfortable and maybe sometimes contentious conversations, but at least you're trying to move the needle. So we had a lot of conversations about talent and how it was such a catalyst for everything we were doing in the business, or a hindrance if you weren't paying close attention to it.
So true.
This may be totally unrelated, but I'll share with you all a funny story. And it is totally unrelated to Acquira specifically. But a couple of years ago, I was facilitating a mastermind group of some entrepreneur and owners here in the Houston area. And one of our guys owned a manufacturing company. It was about a $50 million business, pretty good sized business. He had done some great things with it. But he came to our mastermind one day and he said, I think I'm thinking about bringing my wife back into the business. And we booed him out of the room. And because there was a little bit of a backstory, he and his wife had already tried that twice before. And it goes back to what I was saying about, is there a box on the org chart where she can really add value? Or is this just an accommodation because, God love her, she's bored at home, the kids are grown and gone, she needs something to do. And when you're the owner, you could make that happen, but we strongly encouraged him to take a really hard look at that and have a different kind of discussion about that choice. And sure enough, as it panned out, and we kind of gave him that fuel for juicing that, it's like the discussion didn't have to be, honey, you're not a fit, but it was more like, we have, the company is matured. There are very critical elements in each of our positions. And right now, all of those positions are filled. And, we don't have that kind of need at the business. Would love to have you there, but we don't really have a slot that makes any sense. And she got it. She was a smart lady and she found some other things to do and everything was all good. But it would have been real easy and tempting for him as an owner to say, oh, sure, come on down. We'll figure something out. We'll get it done.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should. When we have structures in place that let us have that conversation, it really can be beneficial. So, but I think, Katie, to your point, the most important thing is once we have that data, now what, right? What are we going to do? How are we going to coach the A players to higher performance? How are we going to address the behavior of our productive jerks? And how do we support and encourage our cute puppies to the next level? Because they often do have a lot more value to add. We just haven't figured out what that is yet.
Yep. Well, I know we're about up on time, folks. Melissa, thank you so much for sitting in. Really appreciate all your hard work and good wisdom here that you shared.
Great to meet all of you. You're on an exciting journey, and I look forward to hearing of your successes with your new teams once you find them.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks.
Pleasure meeting you.
We're going to sign off, say goodbye. This will get processed and posted. Just to be clear, our archives of these videos are over on the ClickUp platform under the content library. There, you should have access to the content library and a whole list of AP calls that go back for, honestly, a couple of years worth of content there. So check it out, and we will see you next time.
Excellent. Thank you, folks. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Thank you all.